It started quietly, almost imperceptibly. On a cold night in October, deep space monitoring stations around the world registered a signal unlike anything recorded before. At first, it was dismissed as noise, a glitch in the system, a random cosmic interference. But for Dr. Eleanor Voss, a leading astrophysicist specializing in unexplained signals, there was something different about this one. The pulses arrived in a rhythmic sequence, precise yet unpredictable, almost like a language encoded in sound waves. It was not the erratic chatter of stars, not the static hum of distant quasars. There was intent, deliberate design, each pattern repeated with slight variation, as if whoever or whatever was sending it was testing human comprehension. Voss had spent decades studying cosmic phenomena. She had witnessed signals, anomalies, and patterns that defied explanation. Yet this was different. It was as if the universe itself had whispered directly into her instruments. She traced the origin to a sector of space previously ignored, a region far beyond human exploration. Calculations suggested that the signal had traveled thousands of light years, possibly originating long before humanity existed. As news spread quietly among certain circles, amateur radio enthusiasts and independent researchers began to pick up fragments of the same transmission. Equipment would behave strangely, recordings would shift unexpectedly, and in rare cases, audio bursts seemed almost melodic. Reports described a feeling of presence, as if the signal was aware it was being heard. Historical records, surprisingly, seemed to echo the same mystery. Ancient civilizations, Mesopotamian astronomers, Mayan scribes, even stone-carving traditions in the American Southwest documented unusual celestial alignments, eclipses, and flashes of light in ways modern scientists now realize were more than coincidence. Some petroglyphs contain sequences that, when decoded mathematically, aligned uncannily with the modern-day signal's rhythm. It was as though someone had been trying to communicate across millennia, leaving clues encoded in stone, clay, and the night sky. The signal was not just passive. Dr. Voss began noticing patterns appearing in her own surroundings. Lab equipment would flicker in sync with the pulses. Computers she had not turned on would display fragments of the sequences. And in her dreams, she saw shapes, symbols, and constellations she could not immediately recognize. Yet, when awake, she felt she somehow understood them. Digging deeper, Voss uncovered declassified Cold War-era documents referencing Project Ecliptic, a series of secret experiments tracking unexplained transmissions. The reports describe similar signals, intercepted decades earlier, often dismissed as anomalies, but never fully understood. Radar logs, pilot statements, and military observations hinted at objects in the sky moving with impossible speed and precision, their origins unknown. One night, alone in her lab, Voss isolated a sub-layer of the transmission. Hidden within the main signal were secondary pulses, containing complex mathematical patterns and sequences of prime numbers. The realization hit her like a shockwave. Intelligence was behind this. A methodical, patient force spanning centuries. Whoever or whatever was sending this was aware of her presence, perhaps even waiting for humanity to be ready. The chapter ends with a chilling thought lingering in the cold night air. If someone has been communicating across time and space, leaving breadcrumbs for us to follow, what message are they trying to convey? And why has it chosen now to reveal itself?
The signal was only the beginning. As Dr. Eleanor Voss delved deeper, she realized that answers would not come from instruments alone. She needed context, history, reports, and records long hidden from the public eye. Her obsession drove her to archives tucked away in basements, forgotten libraries, and secure government facilities, where dust settled thickly on decades of secrecy. The first stop was the National Records Repository, a nondescript building on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., its gray walls hiding thousands of files classified under layers of bureaucracy. Voss moved quickly, scanning indexes of aerial phenomena, military logs, and intelligence reports. There were mentions of unidentified aerial objects dating as far back as the 1940s, descriptions of lights moving at impossible speeds, and radar blips that appeared and disappeared without explanation. Pilots had sworn under oath to seeing craft that defied conventional physics, objects that could hover, accelerate instantaneously, and vanish into thin air. One set of files stood out: Project Ecliptic. The Cold War-era initiative had monitored unusual transmissions intercepted from unexplained sources. Some of these signals resembled the very one Voss had detected. Operatives had logged irregular bursts of energy, some encoding patterns that hinted at intelligence. These files, once classified, were now partially declassified, yet still frustratingly incomplete. Pages were missing and entire reports were redacted, leaving tantalizing gaps. Beyond the official files, Voss discovered hints of a human connection. Scientists who had disappeared mysteriously, others who had gone silent after claiming they were close to understanding. Some had left journals detailing dreams filled with strange symbols and constellations, eerily similar to patterns embedded in the signal. One entry described seeing light dancing across the stars, speaking in pulses only the mind can hear. Voss shivered as she read it. The words mirrored her own experiences almost exactly. But it wasn't just documents that hinted at a broader mystery. Voss uncovered audio recordings from early reconnaissance missions. The tapes were filled with static and mechanical noise, yet buried within were sequences of tones that matched portions of the modern signal. For decades, someone or something had been trying to communicate, leaving subtle breadcrumbs always just beyond human comprehension. The deeper she went, the more the line between observer and participant blurred. In one archive, a security camera flickered, showing shadows that did not belong to any staff or visitor. In another, equipment she had not touched began to respond to the signals, lights pulsing in tandem with her own instruments. It was as if the very act of studying the phenomenon had awakened it. Historical echoes haunted Voss as well. Ancient civilizations recorded celestial events in astonishing detail. In Egypt, tomb hieroglyphs depicted objects crossing the night sky with strange trajectories. In Mesoamerica, steles carved by Mayan scribes suggested knowledge of phenomena not understood until modern physics. Were these records primitive observations, or part of a larger chain of communication, stretching across centuries, preparing humanity to recognize the signal when the time was right? And then came the note, a single yellow cheat typed decades earlier by an anonymous researcher. It read simply, "They are closer than you think, and they are patient." The words carried an ominous weight. Whoever or whatever was behind the transmissions had waited generations, observing silently, leaving subtle traces across history, guiding humanity slowly toward understanding. Voss feels the presence of the unknown pressing in. The signal is no longer a curiosity. It is a force, aware and deliberate, threading through the past and into the present. And one question burns in her mind, impossible to shake. If they have been watching us all this time, what is the purpose of their patience, and what will happen when their message is fully understood?
By now, Dr. Eleanor Voss was no longer just a researcher. She had become a detective of the unknown. Each layer of discovery pulled her deeper into a web of inexplicable events that spanned the globe. The signal, once a distant curiosity, now seemed intimately connected to phenomena recorded for decades, even centuries. Her investigation led her to eyewitness accounts that defied belief. Pilots in the 1950s reported lights moving faster than any known aircraft, sometimes hovering silently before vanishing in an instant. Radar operators documented objects that changed shape mid-flight, leaving no discernible trail. In some instances, multiple reports overlapped from different countries, as if these entities moved freely across borders without restriction. Governments had recorded these sightings meticulously, but few ever made it into public knowledge. Most reports were buried under layers of security clearances, dismissed as unverified or classified anomalies. One report from 1962 detail the high-altitude reconnaissance flight over the North Atlantic. The pilot's log described objects descending from the clouds, reflecting sunlight like mirrors, then accelerating beyond the limits of human technology. The incident caused a temporary radar blackout in the region. Engineers could not explain it. The pilot, still alive when Voss read the declassified documents, had described the event as life-altering, leaving him with a permanent sense of wonder and unease. Voss cross-referenced these sightings with historical astronomical records. Ancient accounts, she noticed, describe similar phenomena. In Japan, 7th century chronicles mention flying fires in the sky, moving against the wind. In northern Africa, cave paintings depicted strange lights traversing the heavens, often interpreted as omens. It was almost as if humanity had long been aware, on some instinctual level, that the skies held mysteries beyond comprehension. While tracing the modern signal, Voss discovered subtle correlations. Certain bursts appeared to coincide with high strangeness sightings reported decades earlier. Could the signal have been guiding observers, subtly influencing the timing of these encounters? It seemed increasingly likely that someone, or something, was orchestrating events over generations, leaving hints carefully layered into human history. The deeper she went, the more personal the phenomena became. Lab instruments would respond without cause, recordings sometimes capturing whispers that defied analysis. At home, electronic devices flickered at night in patterns echoing the signal. Voss's own dreams grew more vivid, filled with constellations she had never seen, forming sequences she could replicate on paper but not fully understand. It was as if the universe, or its messenger, was drawing her into its design, testing her perception, preparing her for something she could not yet comprehend. Then came the mysterious artifacts. In an obscure museum archive, Voss examined objects recovered from aerial anomaly sites, metal fragments, oddly shaped stones, and materials resistant to analysis. Many were allegedly from air sites, yet none matched known alloys or earthly composition. Isotopic ratios suggested origins outside the solar system. The implication was staggering. Humanity had already encountered fragments of this intelligence, yet the world remained unaware. Encounters, records, and signals formed a growing tapestry, revealing an unseen presence threading through human history. Every clue, every anomaly, every whisper seemed purposeful, deliberate. The signal was not random. It was part of a larger design, a puzzle extending across time and space. And Dr. Voss, whether by fate or obsession, was at the center of it. And one chilling thought remains. If intelligence beyond human comprehension has been guiding, observing, and communicating with us for decades or millennia, what is their ultimate goal? And are we truly ready to find out? As Dr. Eleanor Voss continued her investigation, it became clear that the signal was only the surface of a far deeper mystery. The threads she had been following, ancient records, modern sightings, and cryptic transmissions, pointed to one inescapable conclusion. Humanity had barely begun to understand the true scale of what was watching from above. Her research led her to remote locations long associated with unexplained phenomena. In the deserts of New Mexico, she visited sites where alleged aerial craft had been recovered, though most details remained classified. Local folklore preserved fragments of truth, stories of lights descending from the sky, strange hums, and objects that defied gravity and comprehension. Farmers, ranchers, and indigenous communities all recounted the same unsettling experiences, often in hushed tones, as if speaking aloud might draw the unknown's attention. Voss also delved into the archives of early space exploration. Engineers and astronauts had occasionally reported odd readings from satellites and probes, signals that seemed to mimic intelligence, shadows that appeared where no celestial body should exist, and objects moving at impossible speeds. Though often dismissed as instrumentation error, the recurrence of these anomalies across decades suggested a pattern, a deliberate presence observing human advancement. The connection to the modern signal was undeniable. Certain bursts coincided with decades-old anomalies, creating an eerie sense of continuity. Voss hypothesized that the signal was not just a message, but a record, a layered archive encoded in sound waves and frequencies, meant to be deciphered over generations. The implications were staggering. Someone or something had been preparing humanity to understand, nudging events subtly across time. Voss's investigation grew personal. In her dreams, patterns from the signal appeared as constellations, forming shapes she couldn't name. Waking, she discovered that some symbols matched ancient carvings she had never studied, etched in stone centuries before. She began to feel the weight of unseen eyes, a presence that seemed aware of her every move. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. In one archival discovery, Voss found detailed diagrams of materials recovered from unexplained crash sites, metals with unknown isotopes, ceramics resistant to heat and impact, and fragments containing structures microscopic and precise beyond human fabrication. These artifacts suggested intelligence and technology far surpassing modern science. And yet, despite decades of study, the world remained oblivious. Only those who sought the truth could glimpse fragments of the greater design. As night fell in her lab, a subtle shift occurred. Equipment pulsed faintly in response to the signal, lights flickering in precise patterns. It was as if the signal was acknowledging her presence, testing her resolve. The universe, or its messenger, was no longer distant. It had reached into her reality, bridging the gap between observer and participant. If intelligence has been quietly guiding, observing, and communicating with humanity for generations, what else might lie hidden just beneath the surface of our perception? And will we ever be ready to confront it?
By this point, Dr. Eleanor Voss had pieced together fragments spanning decades, centuries, and even millennia. But one truth became undeniable. The signal was not random. It was part of a larger design, a tapestry interwoven with human history, natural phenomena, and unexplained aerial events. Patterns were emerging, and they were impossible to ignore. She focused her attention on mapping sightings and transmissions globally. Reports from pilots, astronomers, and even ordinary civilians revealed recurring paths in the sky. Certain regions, deserts, mountain ranges, and isolated plains appeared repeatedly in accounts of unusual phenomena. These locations often overlapped with ancient sites, ceremonial grounds, observatories, and monuments designed to track celestial movements. It seemed the signal was guiding observers to notice, almost like a cosmic breadcrumb trail, hidden in plain sight for centuries. Her analysis extended to frequency patterns. By overlaying decades of signals, from early Cold War intercepts to the modern transmission, she began to see a structure. Certain bursts coincided with astronomical events, solar flares, planetary alignments, and eclipses. Some patterns even aligned with ancient calendars, like the Mayan long count or Egyptian star charts. Was this an intelligence working on a scale of centuries, preparing humanity to interpret the message at precisely the right moment? Voss also explored cultural responses. Across the globe, myths, legends, and folklore often described lights in the sky, beings descending, or messages carried on the wind. In Scandinavia, Viking sagas spoke of flying shields of fire over fjords. In Central America, codices depicted strange airborne discs over cities, their purpose undeciphered for centuries. Even in modern times, eyewitnesses described uncanny shapes and movements, defying physics. The more she studied, the more she realized that these occurrences were part of a repeating cosmic pattern, a continuity across time that humans had only glimpsed in fragments. But the deeper the patterns became, the stranger the coincidences. Certain bursts of the modern signal matched dates of critical historical events, mysterious disappearances of aircraft,
sudden technological breakthroughs, and even unexplained astronomical phenomena. It was almost as if the signal had been watching, waiting for pivotal moments to occur, nudging humanity along a path only partially understood. Her personal encounters with the signal intensified. At night, instruments in her lab flickered unpredictably, sometimes displaying shapes, maps, or sequences she had not programmed. On one occasion, a brief audio fragment played through her speakers, a tonal sequence resembling a heartbeat punctuated by a pattern she recognized from an ancient Egyptian star chart. She began to sense that the signal was learning, adapting, responding to her observations. Voss began connecting these patterns not only to space, but to human cognition. Could the signal be influencing perception, memory, or intuition? Reports of dreams matching the signal's sequences suggested a subtle interaction with the mind. Researchers in earlier decades had reported similar experiences: visions, fleeting symbols, sudden understanding of complex mathematics, all seemingly triggered by exposure to the signal. Could it be that intelligence was communicating not only through instruments, but through consciousness itself? The signal was no longer a distant enigma. It had become a force threading through time, space, and human history, testing, teaching, and observing. And one question hung heavier than any other. If this intelligence has been shaping human awareness for centuries, what is the ultimate message it seeks to convey? And are we ready to hear it?
By now, Dr. Eleanor Voss was no longer simply observing. She was entangled. The signal had begun to infiltrate not only her work, but her reality. Small anomalies became impossible to ignore. Lights flickering in her lab that synchronized perfectly with the pulses, instruments producing data she hadn't programmed, and audio fragments that seemed to respond when she spoke aloud. It was no longer theory. Something conscious was interacting with her. Her investigation led her to a series of previously classified field reports. In the deserts of Nevada and New Mexico, military teams had documented objects that defied all known physics. One file, marked only as Project Sentinel, described a craft that appeared in radar images, vanished, then reappeared hundreds of miles away within seconds. Witnesses, sworn to secrecy, described lights that moved like sentient beings, avoiding detection yet always observable if one knew where to look. Voss cross-referenced these events with the modern signal. She found a startling alignment. Many sightings coincided with subtle bursts in the transmission she was studying. It was as though the signal was coordinating the movements of these objects, or at least marking their presence for those who were paying attention. The implications were staggering. If the signal was guiding or responding to activity, then humanity had been unknowingly part of a conversation spanning decades. Historical anomalies deepened the mystery. In Europe, 16th century manuscripts described celestial ships over cities during key historical events. In Asia, 12th century chronicles depicted glowing objects maneuvering with impossible precision during battles, often interpreted as omens or divine signs. Across continents and centuries, these accounts shared startling similarities: precise movement, sudden appearance and disappearance, and an intelligence behind the action. Voss's personal experience began to mirror these accounts. In her dreams, she saw geometric shapes and constellations forming patterns she could not explain, sequences matching both the modern signal and ancient records. She began sketching them obsessively, discovering correlations she could not have anticipated. It was as though the intelligence behind the signal was communicating visually, not just audibly, embedding knowledge in symbols and forms that transcended language. Artifacts collected from crash sites added yet another layer. Pieces of metal and composite materials exhibited structural properties beyond current human technology. Isotope ratio suggested origins outside Earth's solar system. Some fragments bore micro-etchings, patterns so precise they could have been intended as messages. The realization hit Voss hard. Humanity had already encountered tangible evidence of this intelligence, yet most of the world remained unaware, misled, or in denial. Even more unsettling were the reports of missing researchers and field operatives. Those who delved too deeply into anomalies often vanished without explanation or returned with fragmented memories. Some left journals filled with cryptic references, warnings, or equations they claimed were revealed to them during encounters. A recurring phrase in many of these accounts was the same Voss had discovered in the archives. They are patient. They watch. The tension is palpable. The signal is no longer abstract. It is active, conscious, and patient. It has guided human perception, influenced events, and left behind both artifacts and warnings. And the question that looms larger than ever is chilling. If this intelligence has been orchestrating so much from the shadows, what will it do when humanity finally comprehends its presence? Dr. Eleanor Voss had reached the point where observation alone was no longer enough. The signal had become a force, threading through history, through the skies, and into her very consciousness. Each layer of discovery revealed new patterns, subtle connections between past anomalies, ancient records, and the artifacts she had examined. Her latest breakthrough came when she began overlaying decades of sightings and transmissions on global maps. Certain locations emerged repeatedly: deserts in North America, remote highlands in Europe, vast plains in South America, and isolated islands in the Pacific. Many of these sites corresponded to ancient ceremonial grounds, stone observatories, and monuments aligned with stars. The correlation was too precise to be coincidence. The signal, Voss realized, was guiding attention, not only for modern observers, but for civilizations throughout history. Examining the signal further, she detected sequences that mirrored astronomical phenomena: eclipses, planetary alignments, and even rare comet passages. These sequences coincided with historical reports of unexplained events, such as vanished aircraft, sudden technological discoveries, or mysterious natural phenomena. It was as if the intelligence behind the signal was not only observing humanity, but subtly interacting with the timeline itself. Her research took her to forgotten texts and esoteric records. In medieval Europe, scholars wrote of lights that moved against the heavens, obeying a hidden order. In ancient China, astronomers recorded celestial objects that appeared and disappeared, sometimes delivering patterns in the night sky that mirrored mathematical principles. Across cultures and centuries, the descriptions shared remarkable similarities: precise movement, sudden appearances, and a sense of intent. Artifacts added further weight to her conclusions. Metals and composites recovered from unexplained incidents exhibited structures impossible for known human technology. Some bore micro-etchings, tiny symbols arranged with mathematical precision, almost like instructions or messages. Isotopic analysis suggested non-terrestrial origins, hinting at a presence far beyond Earth. The evidence was converging into a single, undeniable truth: humanity was being observed and perhaps guided by an intelligence far older and far more patient than anyone had imagined. Voss's personal experiences grew more intense. Instruments in her lab responded to the signal spontaneously, lights pulsing, screens flickering with patterns that mirrored ancient star maps. Dreams became a form of subconscious communication, filled with sequences and constellations she had never encountered consciously. She began to feel that the signal was shaping perception itself, nudging her understanding, testing her ability to interpret the unseen. Even more disturbing were reports she uncovered about other researchers. Those who had studied the signal before her often vanished or returned with fragmented knowledge. Journals left behind described cryptic visions, equations, and warnings, all pointing to the same truth: they are patient, they watch. This message seemed to repeat across decades, generations, and cultures, a constant reminder that the intelligence behind the signal was deliberate, meticulous, and in control. The full scope of the mystery begins to crystallize. The signal is no longer just a series of frequencies. It is a presence, intelligent and patient, guiding human awareness, influencing events, and leaving messages encoded across time.
And the ultimate question becomes inescapable. If this intelligence has been shaping perception and history for centuries, what will happen when its message is finally understood? And are we prepared for the truth?
By now, Dr. Eleanor Voss felt the weight of the signal pressing in on every aspect of her life. Nights were sleepless, her mind replaying sequences of tones, patterns, and symbols. Instruments in her lab behaved unpredictably, seemingly responding to her presence, pulsing and flickering in ways that suggested awareness. The line between observation and interaction had begun to blur. Her research led her to a series of little-known incidents that had escaped mainstream attention. In 1978, a military radar installation in Argentina recorded lights descending from the sky, following a path that mirrored a sequence she had detected in the signal. Observers reported a low hum, a vibration in the air, and a sensation that the objects were aware of their attention. The files were heavily redacted, but eyewitness accounts described patterns that matched both historical celestial records and modern transmissions. The phenomenon was global. In 1984, an observatory in Siberia recorded an unusual cosmic flare, which, when analyzed retrospectively, contained frequency patterns identical to those in the modern signal. Similar events were documented in remote areas of Africa, Australia, and the Pacific Islands. Across decades and continents, recurring patterns suggested intelligence, design, and patient observation. Whoever or whatever was behind the signal had not only monitored humanity, but left markers in both time and space, waiting for those prepared to understand. Artifacts added further gravity. Voss examined fragments recovered from alleged crash sites, materials that resisted analysis yet contained microscopic markings. These micro-etchings mirrored mathematical and astronomical sequences she had seen in historical records. Some fragments were isotopically inconsistent with Earth's composition, implying a non-terrestrial origin. The pieces formed a pattern. Humanity had encountered elements of this intelligence before, but most encounters have been misunderstood, hidden, or ignored. The signal itself became more interactive. Voss noted that sequences occasionally synchronized with her work. Lights pulsed on monitors when she made discoveries, subtle tones echoed patterns in her dreams, and occasionally, fragments of audio seemed to anticipate questions she hadn't yet asked. It was no longer passive observation. The signal was responding, adapting, and perhaps guiding. Her personal experiences also suggested subtle communication. Dreams became increasingly vivid, filled with constellations, geometric shapes, and patterns she had never consciously learned. In one particularly striking dream, she saw a spiral of lights converging on Earth, forming a map that spanned continents. She awoke with sketches she had never drawn consciously, yet they perfectly reflected the vision. Could this be direct interaction? A bridge between her mind and the intelligence behind the signal? Historical context deepened the mystery. Across centuries, scholars, astronomers, and chroniclers had noted anomalous events in the skies, often interpreted as omens or divine messages. In many cases, those observations coincided with the signal's bursts, suggesting a continuity of interaction. The intelligence behind the signal had been patient, persistent, and deliberate, embedding itself into human history, culture, and consciousness. The realization grows. The signal is no longer just a mysterious phenomenon. It is a bridge, a thread connecting humanity to a presence that has waited centuries for comprehension. And the question now becomes urgent and inescapable. What is the message it carries? And what will happen when we finally decipher it?
Dr. Eleanor Voss had followed the threads for months. Archives, ancient records, eyewitness accounts, artifacts, and the persistent signal itself. Now, everything converged toward a single, terrifying clarity. The signal was no longer merely a mystery. It was a message, and it had been waiting for humanity to listen. Her lab, usually a place of calm analysis, now felt like a nexus between worlds. Monitors flickered in precise patterns, instruments pulsed in synchrony, and a low hum resonated through the room. The signal had become active, almost sentient, guiding her toward understanding.
Each pattern she decoded revealed fragments of a larger puzzle, sequences layered like a code within a code, stretching across time, space, and consciousness. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. By overlaying ancient records with the sequences from modern transmissions, Voss discovered a spatial temporal map encoded within the signal. It highlighted specific locations across the globe: remote deserts, isolated mountain ranges, underwater formations, and precise states spanning centuries. It was a guide, a set of coordinates pointing toward humanity's next steps in comprehension. Historical anomalies fell into place. Disappearances of aircraft, sudden scientific breakthroughs, and rare astronomical events all aligned with the map. Even legends, myths, and folklore from disparate cultures could now be seen as fragments of the same overarching narrative. The intelligence behind the signal had not been silent, it had been persistent, patient, shaping perception and history to prepare humanity for this moment. Artifacts she had studied earlier now revealed deeper meaning. Micro-etchings, previously dismissed as random patterns, were part of a symbolic language, mathematical and geometric in design. Once translated with the context of the signal, they form instructions, warnings, and coordinates, a guide for those who sought to understand. Voss realized that the intelligence had been leaving breadcrumbs across time, ensuring that each generation could contribute to the larger comprehension of its presence. Her own mind became a vessel for the message. Dreams now included vivid constellations forming sequences she could replicate, visions of objects moving in the sky with impossible precision, and flashes of insight that allowed her to connect historical dots she had never thought possible. It was as if the signal was speaking directly to her, guiding her toward comprehension. And then came the warning. Embedded within the final layers of the transmission was a cautionary note, simple but profound. Observation is the first step. Understanding comes only to those who are patient. Misinterpretation may lead to consequences unforeseen. The implication was chilling. Humanity had been monitored, guided, and prepared, but the consequences of failure were unknown and possibly dire. Dr. Voss stands at the threshold of revelation. The message is nearly complete, the puzzle almost solved, yet the final piece remains elusive. The intelligence behind the signal is no longer abstract. It is deliberate, aware, and patient. The question now is clear. What will humanity do with the knowledge it is about to receive, and are we truly ready for what lies beyond comprehension?
Dr. Eleanor Voss now stood at the precipice of revelation. Months of research, decades of historical records, and countless anomalous observations had converged into a single, undeniable truth. The signal was not merely a curiosity, it was an intelligence, deliberate, patient, and centuries in the making. Every artifact, every ancient record, every strange event she had studied now made sense as part of a single, intricate design. The signal pulsed in her lab with unprecedented clarity, a series of patterns so precise they seemed almost alive. Monitors flickered with constellations and geometric forms she had sketched repeatedly, and for the first time, the pieces aligned perfectly. The hidden language within the micro-etched artifacts, the ancient myths, and the modern transmissions formed a cohesive message, a bridge of understanding spanning human history, intended to awaken those who were prepared. Her research now pointed to a series of locations worldwide: deserts, mountains, underwater formations, each corresponding to key historical events and celestial alignments. These sites were more than coordinates, they were markers of awareness, designed to guide humanity's perception gradually over generations. The intelligence behind the signal had orchestrated centuries of observation, nudging humanity toward comprehension with meticulous patience. Voss realized that the signal was not only external, but interactive. Her dreams,
Her intuition, even her subconscious, had been shaped by it. Sequences of light, patterns in the sky, and strange occurrences that had once seemed coincidental were now revealed as deliberate communication. The intelligence was not simply observing, it was testing humanity's readiness, preparing the species to understand a reality far beyond current comprehension. The warning embedded within the final layers of the signal was unmistakable. Observation is the beginning. Understanding is the challenge. Misinterpretation carries consequences beyond human reckoning. The intelligence was patient, but it was clear that patience was not infinite. Humanity had reached a threshold, and what happened next depended entirely on readiness and interpretation. Voss stood in the quiet hum of her lab, instruments alive with the signal, and reflected on the centuries of preparation that had led to this moment. She thought of ancient civilizations, long-lost artifacts, and cryptic records, all threads in a vast tapestry designed to awaken understanding. The presence she had been deciphering was no longer abstract. It was intentional, deliberate, and aware. The final revelation came not in words, but in understanding. The signal was a bridge, a conduit connecting humanity to a broader intelligence that had existed long before Earth even formed. It was not a threat, nor a visitor, but a messenger spanning time and space, guiding, teaching, and observing. The patience of this intelligence was both awe-inspiring and humbling, a reminder of the vastness of the cosmos and the limit of human perception. If humanity is now standing at the threshold of understanding, will we rise to the challenge or falter in the face of knowledge too vast to fully comprehend? The answer remains unknown, and the mystery persists, lingering in the pulse of the signal, in the constellations above, and in the hidden patterns threaded through history itself.